Okay, so hi everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you who've joined us today for this webinar on international education. My name is Faiza and I'll be your host today. I am the program coordinator for the Master of Education degree and the grad cert in international education in Murdoch, Dubai. We have Riyad with us today, who will be talking about international education in the context of the UAE and also on IB, of course. Riyad is an extremely experienced IB expert, and we are all really looking forward to this presentation. So just a quick reminder before we begin, admissions are still open for the May trimester for our MEd degree and also for the grad cert in IE. Our grad cert students achieve the teaching and learning certificate from IB, and our MEd students have the options of getting an IB cert as well. We're the only university in the UAE offering that. And also a bit of a good news, Murdoch University is starting a Master of Education specializing in instructional leadership from this September onwards. So our MEd degree can be completed with either a specialization in international education or instructional leadership. If you require more info about the MEd program or the grad cert, please contact our marketing team. Meg is here online as well, or you can visit our website. If you require more info on the program itself and the academics, you can contact me. I'll put my email address in the chat. A little bit on housekeeping. Please put your questions in the question or the chat boxes. You can have a conversation all the way along, but in the end, we'll allot about 15 minutes for Riyad to answer your questions. So without further delay, let's begin today's webinar. It's over to you, Riyad.
Thank you very much, Faiza. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Riyad Yaghi. I'm the campus director at Emirates National School, Mohammed bin Zayed City Campus. I've been there for about 6 years. And prior to that, I worked in different parts of the GCC countries. I worked in Bahrain, and I also worked in Abu Dhabi as a teacher. So my experience is very long. I've been in the region for about 23 years. Working as a teacher, as a head of school, as a principal, and as a school director, and finally as a campus director for a very large international school in Abu Dhabi. So today's webinar, we're going to talk about international education as a whole, and in particular in the UAE. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about mainly 4 points. One is international education. I'll give a bit of an explanation about that and an overview. I will also talk about international education in the UAE and talk about some of the international schools in the United Arab Emirates, when they started and what kind of programs they have, and the definition of international education in the UAE context. I'll also talk about the IB, explain the IB programs. I'll talk about a bit about the 4 programs of the IB. And then finally, we will discuss what IB program is suitable for your school and your students. So how is international education defined? This has been, there has been quite a discussion about international education. And as you can see, I'm going to put up on the screen in a bit 3 definitions that I'm sharing with you. Now, the definitions are not by any means encompass everything that there is to be about international education, but I just chose 3 definitions that I feel are closer to the context that we live in. So, of course, you can research more definitions of international education, but the first one that I have chosen is education that transcends national borders by the exchange of people, such as student exchange programs. What does that mean? If you have a student that goes from one country to another under the student exchange program, for example, that school will be offering international education. In a previous school that I worked at, we had a student come from South Africa, an exchange student from South Africa, and that student is South African. He was studying the South African curriculum in his home country, and as part of the exchange program that we had at one of the schools I worked at, he came over to our school and started studying our curriculum. That is international education in one sense of the word. Another definition that I have chosen for you is schools that open branches in other countries and continue to offer their own curriculum. And I'm sure you have examples of that of your own. I will share examples as well as we go along, but this is also another definition. So if a school in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, for example, opens a branch in Kuwait, that school is considered an international school according to some of the definitions. However, the IB defines international education as a comprehensive approach to education that intentionally prepares students to be active and engaged participants in an interconnected world. So here you go. These are three of the definitions that you can have for international education. International teachers and students. Now, usually in an international school, you will have international teachers. That's how some see international schools. Others see international schools as schools with students from different nationalities, hence international students. Others might see an international education or international schools as schools that offer an internationally recognized program. So for teachers and students, teachers from different cultural backgrounds can provide students with international mindedness, which is needed to help them become global citizens. One of the advantages of international education. Another advantage is a global outlook. What does that mean? Global outlook means using solid and interesting examples, linking each new skill to an international example, making students see how their education is linked to the outside world. So one, you have cross-cultural skill sets, and two, you have global outlook. In addition, you have innovative methods. Through the collaboration of teachers in schools and campuses, new teaching methods are fostered and embraced, benefiting all students. Now, those are all advantages of international education. I'm just going to limit it to four. The fourth advantage is experienced educators. Students benefit from having international teachers who bring in a wealth of educational experience to international schools. So you have those international schools that have teachers from different backgrounds, that have teachers from different countries. They bring their own experiences to the schools, and the students benefit greatly from those. In addition to that, the students will benefit from studying international programs because they might be in their own country, in their host country or home country, and they're studying about programs of other accrediting bodies, for example, the IB, the IGCSE, and hence and so forth. Let me give you some examples of campuses in multiple countries, schools that have campuses in different, or that have branches in different countries. You can either call it a campus or a branch, it's up to you. So when you have SABIS, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of SABIS or the Shwefat schools. That is one school that has many branches in different countries. You have many branches here in the UAE, you have branches in the GCC countries. They have even opened up a school in the USA. And we'll talk about one of the benefits of having schools or branches in different countries. Another example, Nord Anglia Group. That's a group that has opened schools in different countries, and hence the word international. Brighton College is a third example, and those are, I'm sure, examples that you are familiar with from the UAE. What are the benefits? Let's talk about some of the benefits. One, continuity of the vision. If the school has, when the school has a vision, that vision is applied in the branches that they open in different countries. So you have a continuity of the vision. Another benefit that I have chosen for you today is a consistency of systems, the educational outcomes, etc. You know, the school can carry on with the systems that they have in place. They'll have the same focus on educational outcomes and so on. The ease of transfer between branches or campuses, and also ease of transfer between countries. Since the school will have the same system, the students can transfer easily between one branch and another, between a campus and another, and sometimes even between one country and another. And we'll talk more about that when we discuss IB. Name branding, of course. You know, the schools will have a name, and this name will be its brand, and it will be known in different countries and in different parts of the same country if they open branches locally. And finally, there's a financial aspect to it as well, or a financial benefit to it as well. The challenges, culture. Culture can be a big challenge when schools choose to open campuses or branches in multiple countries or in different countries. Sometimes the biggest hurdle or the biggest disadvantage might be culture, because the school is carrying its own culture and going abroad to another country where they have to apply their culture and might be faced with the culture of the host country. Recruitment of staff. I'm sure we've all had our challenges with the recruitment of staff, and that is not easy. For example, if I'm offering, let's say, the Australian curriculum here in the UAE, what kind of teachers am I going to recruit? Do I recruit teachers who have Australian background? Do I hire Australians only? Or do I hire teachers and train them to teach the Australian curriculum? Accreditations, authorizations, evaluations are other challenges. Why? Because you're dealing now with the systems of of the country of origin of that particular school, and you're also dealing with the accreditations, authorizations, and evaluations, and the systems, and so on and so forth of the country that is hosting this school. So this can be one of the challenges as well. Continuity of vision. You got to make sure that the vision that the school believes in is carried out in different branches. And that might be a challenge because sometimes it might conflict with the culture. There might be a conflict even with not only the culture of the school community, but also with the culture of the hosting country. Parents and students' expectations. The expectations of students and parents in one country might be different than the expectations of the expectations of parents and students in other countries. And I'm sure for those staff who have, or for those teachers that have worked in different countries, they have seen the expectations differ from one place to another. So those are some of the benefits and some of the challenges of schools that have multiple campuses or different campuses in different countries. Let's talk a little bit about international education in the UAE, since we are here in the UAE and we have lots of international schools in the UAE. And again, international education can be defined differently from one person to another. And we have seen examples of schools that offer international programs, but the majority of their students are nationals. So does that make it an international school? We'll talk about that in a minute. Just let's talk about some of the timeline of international education in the UAE. We're going to start as back as 1970. Then we're going to talk about international education in the 1980s, the 90s, and then from 2000 to 2021. So in 1970s, we did the first international school to open its door in UAE. And that school, the first international school to open its doors in UAE was, believe it or not, and I mentioned that, I gave you kind of a hint at the beginning, was Shuwaifat School in 1975 in the Emirate of, not Abu Dhabi, not Dubai, but in the Emirate of Sharjah. So that's kind of like the start of international education in the UAE. Some might differ with this and say, there were other schools offering different programs, but here we're talking about schools that offer international education. In the 1980s, we had private schools that began implementing programs such as the IGCSE, and that's hence the I in IGCSE. Some people consider the CBSE to be an international program if it's taught outside of India. And you have other, of course, examples of that in the 1980s. In the 1990s, we have more schools to offer international programs and international exams. Now this is one thing that I would like to address in today's session, the difference between offering international programs and offering international exams. Some schools offer international programs, but their students do not take the end of cycle or end of program examinations, as some call it, the leaving examinations. Now, is that school still considered an international school? The answer is yes, because the exam does not dictate whether the school is international or not. The first IB school in the UAE, that was in the Emirate of Dubai, and in the year 1992, and that school is Emirates International School. Not Emirates National, but Emirates International School in Dubai in 1992. In 2000, from 2000 to 2021, I'm going to talk about the number of international schools in the UAE in the year 2015. So far in that year, the total came up to 511 schools registered as international schools in the UAE. 52 IB World Schools in the UAE as of 2021. 45 of those offer the DP or the diploma program. And I'm going to talk about the DP and other IB programs later on in the session when I address the 4 IB programs. But this is a bit of a history of international schools in the UAE, dating all the way back to 1970s and ending in 2021. And as you can see, it's very interesting to know that the first international school was started in UAE in 1975 in the Emirate of Sharjah, and that was Shuwaifat School. International programs, if we were to talk about some of these international programs, the largest of those, I'm sure you guys know them already. You have the American curriculum. You have the IB, of course, the International Baccalaureate. And of course, you have the British system. And a lot of people know the British system because of the famous IGCSE exams, the A levels, and so on. So these are some of the 3 largest programs. Of course, you have other schools now in the country offering different curriculums. You have the Chinese curriculum being offered. You have the Australian being offered. You have different programs as well. Now, the UAE students that study in the UAE, where do they end up going? Well, many students choose to study in international accredited universities here in the UAE because the international education has come to their country. Those universities are now in the UAE and they are accredited. One of such universities is Murdoch, of course. Some choose to study in the UK and the US, UK and US universities. So they are accepted there and they end up traveling to the UK and the US. Others, of course, choose to study in Australia, Canada. We even have students now studying in Japan and in China, as you will see in a bit. Defining the IB. What is the IB so we can know what IB is? Now, the I in IB is international. Hence, we're talking about international education. The I in IGCSE is international, and that is also an international program. So what is the IB? The IB stands for International Baccalaureate. And I'm just going to read for you what the IB talks about in their website. The International Baccalaureate, or IB, offers 4 high-quality, challenging educational programs to students aged 3 to 19. And I'll talk in detail about these 4 programs. The IB programs focus on fostering critical thinking and building problem-solving skills while encouraging diversity, international mindedness, hence the word international again, curiosity, and a healthy appetite for learning and excellence. And IB education provides students distinct advantages as they enter a world where asking the right questions is as important as discovering answers. For over 50 years, our global community of world-class educators and coordinators engage with more than 1.4 million students in over 5,300 schools across 158 countries. So the IB is spreading very fast. It is now in 5,300 schools in 158 countries. And their aim was to educate up to 1 million students. Now they're at 1.4 million students. And I'm going to talk about the IB profiles and what do the profiles do to students, and how do we know that this student is benefiting from the IB programs. So the IB learner profile, as you can see, teaches students how to become knowledgeable, risk takers, inquirers, principled, open-minded, and so on. I'm not going to go through the list, but because the IB education is centered around fostering all the IB learning profiles among students while encouraging students to become global citizens. Again, talking about international education, teaching the students to become global citizens. And you have the 4 IB programs here in front of you on the screen. I'll start on the very left of the screen, the Primary Years Program, or PYP. That program is for students aged 3 to 12. Then you have the Middle Years Program on the far right in red for students between the ages of 11 and 16. And then the 2 programs on the bottom of the screen are for students aged 16 to 19. And you have the DP program, the diploma program, and then you have the CP, or the career-related program. Now, let's start with the PYP. The PYP is for students 3 to 12. The IB believes that if you have all of these 4 programs, you can have a student that truly reflects the IB learner profile. Now, the PYP is always yellow in color. MYP is always red, and that's an easy way to identify him. The diploma program, which is for usually grades 11 and 12 students, or years 12 and 13. And so is the CP program for the same age group. The newest of all of these 4 programs is the CP, or the career-related programs, and the oldest is the DP, the diploma program, or DP. Many schools in the UAE and even abroad, they will choose one of the 4 programs or more. Is there any harm in that? Well, that goes back to the school. What does the school decide, and what benefits the school the most? For example, a lot of schools and even parents like to focus on the last 2 years of education in the schools. Hence, you have schools implementing the diploma program or the career-related program. So many schools will have international education only for the last 2 years of school, 11 and 12. And I worked in schools like that. They've had their national program going on up to grade 10. And then in grades 11 and 12, they've had the diploma program or the DP. Can schools function like that? They sure can. Since we're talking internationally, you can even have a combination of different programs going on at the school at the same time, and there's no harm in that. I worked in a school in the past that offered the IGCSE in grades 9 and 10. So the IGCSE was started in grade 9, and the students took the exams in grade 10, and that is British. And then after grade 10, that school offered the DP program. And when we met with the parents and we spoke to them about offering 2 international programs, the parents said, well, you're offering British education to grades 9 and 10. Why are you offering American education in grades 11 and 12? And we said, we're not. We're offering international education. The IB is not American. The IB is international. So it said, but why not continue with the British? Well, that's a choice that the schools make. They make that choice based on their needs, based on what's better for the students, what benefits them the most, based on the research that they conduct, based on the students' choice of universities, based on scholarships. There could be a number of things why the schools choose one program over another, or to go from one program to another, as in the example that I mentioned, going from IGCSE to IB. So let's talk about the IB in the UAE. And I'm starting with the PYP because that is the program for the first age group. So the PYP program is offered by 31 schools. Now this data is as early as 2021. So you have 31 schools in the UAE that offer PYP. Now I'm talking about accredited schools. Then you have the MYP program, and that is offered by 22 schools in the UAE. So you have, if you want to talk about continuity of programs, PYP, and then MYP, as I explained earlier. The DP, the diploma program, that is offered by 45 schools in the UAE. And you can see, going back to what I mentioned earlier, a lot of schools focus on the DP program because that is your school leaving exams program, if you may. And they focus on that because of grades 11 and 12, and it helps the students into university and so on. And the last of the 4 programs is the CP. That is the newest of the 4 programs, and it's the newest of the 4 programs implemented in the UAE. And that is offered in 14 schools in the UAE. So you can see the number of schools that offer the programs. Now, this means that some schools can implement or are implementing PYP, but not the rest. Some schools might implement 2 programs and not the rest. And some schools might implement 3 out of the 4 programs. If you offer 3 out of the 4, or if you offer 4 out of the 4 IB programs, that is what is called the IB continuum. So the PYP was present in the UAE in 1992. And we have 52 IB World Schools in UAE offering 1 or more of the 4 IB programs. So as I said, some schools might have 1 program, might have 2, might have 3, and some schools might have all four. What do the IB learners or the IB students, what are they? What do they know? They're encouraged to think critically and solve complex problems. Going back to the mission statement of the IB, they drive their own learning. They're a core part in educational programs that can lead them to some of the highest ranking universities around the world. It's a very rigorous program. It's a very rigorous program, and it is a program that is accepted in many, many universities across the world. More culturally aware, the IB students are more culturally aware through the development of a second language, because in IB, especially in the higher grades, they have to have a second language. The IB students are able to engage with more people in an increasingly globalized, rapidly changing world. And again, the key word here is globalized or internationalized, because that is the international thinking or international education that we are talking about, and which is very evident in the IB education. What kind of access do the IB schools get? What kind of access do they have? They have high quality programs of education which support development of knowledgeable and inquiring students. So IB students have access to that. They have access to high quality programs of education. I'm talking here about the IB programs, of course, the PYP, MYP, DP, and CP. IB schools also have access to professional development, PD, that supports effective educators and collaborative professional learning communities. IB is very big on PD. They're very big on professional development, because they want their teachers to always be up to speed and up to par on new trends in education and how to deliver high quality education to the students. More culturally aware through the development of a second language. It is very important in IB for students to learn a second language, and I believe I talked about that in a while ago. Let me go back to the slide that talks about what the IB schools get. So we talked about the PD. They also get a worldwide network of highly respected IB world schools working together to share best practice. And this is very common between IB schools. They share best practices. They rely on each other for help and support. They talk about what works in one school that might not work in another. They talk about small tricks that they can use in scheduling if they have more than one program. Again, talking about different programs, this might be an issue that some schools are faced with, or a challenge. Let me put it that way, that some schools are faced with. So they rely on each other's advice and experience and expertise, in solving these or going through these hurdles that they might face, or overcoming some of the challenges that they might face. Now, when schools have different branches in different countries, or even different branches in the same country, they can implement something called proximity learning, where you have a group of 5 students, for example, in one branch, let's say in the Dubai branch, and these 5 students have chosen physics, but you can't have a physics teacher just for 5 students for whatever reasons. You can't recruit one, the one that you have has already left for different reasons, whatever. And it might not even be financially feasible for you to have a physics teacher just for 5 students. So you rely on the physics teacher in another branch, and you have something called proximity learning. A teacher in one branch is teaching his or her students in that particular branch, and also in the other branch, or other branches, if you may. And I've spoken to I've heard of one of the teachers that mentioned that he teaches in the UAE, his students, and some of the students in Bahrain. And of course, the school is benefiting greatly from that, and I'm sure so are the students. How about IB teachers? What kind of access do they have? They are given access to high quality PD that encourages critical thinking. IB is very big on critical thinking, self-reflection. I think a lot of us need to do self-reflection because it's very important, and dedication to lifelong learning and continuous improvement. Innovative and diverse education frameworks, unit planners, teaching resources and evaluation tools, certification and degree programs offered by highly respected universities worldwide. Now, the IB teachers are also encouraged to become different or have different roles with the IB. I usually encourage my teachers, if they're in grades 11 and 12, to become IB examiners, because I believe that is very, very important for them to know how these to know how these exams are moderated, how these exams are marked, and so they can be able to transfer that knowledge and experience to their own students. I also encourage my teachers to become workshop leaders. I myself became a workshop leader about 5 years ago, where I started training schools on the MYP, and then I became a workshop leader for DP. So it's very prestigious, not only prestigious, but it's also very valuable for teachers to have different roles with the IB. And you can have, of course, different roles such as reader, you can have site visitor, and different roles. A pedagogy known to produce students who are motivated to continue inquiry and lifelong learning beyond school study. So we're not only focusing on the students inside of the school, but also what happens to them after they leave the school. Now, we talked about the 4 IB programs. Let's talk about what program best suits your school, or how would you choose the program that best suits your school. First of all, you have to know for what cycle you want to have the IB program, or one of the IB programs suitable for. Are we talking about primary school? Are we talking about middle school? Are we talking about secondary school? What kind of schools are we talking about? So keep that in mind. So talking about the PYP, which I first mentioned when I talked about the IB programs, and I said it's not usual, but it's always yellow in color. The PYP is for children ages 3 to 12. So you're usually talking, if you're talking about grades, you're talking about kindergarten up to grade 5. So you're talking kindergarten to grade 5. So that's your kindergarten and your primary school. This program, the PYP, nurtures and develops young students as caring, active participants in a lifelong journey of learning through a student-centered approach to education. Okay, it's a student-centered approach. And that is something that, we love to focus on when we talk about IB programs. It's student-centered and not teacher-centered. So again, the PYP is for grades kindergarten, if you may, in our terminology, kindergarten to grade 5, or you can say, I think it's FS1 to year 6, if I'm not mistaken, in the British system. And that is your PYP. That is the first of the 4 IB programs. First, in terms of which cycle they deal with. The second is the MYP. Again, I mentioned this earlier. The MYP is always red, and the MYP, or middle years program, is for students. It's 5 years long, okay? And that is a challenging framework that encourages students to make practical connections between their studies and the real world. Here we're talking about practical connections. The MYP is inclusive by design. Students of all interests and academic abilities can benefit from their participation. It's ages for students aged 11 through 16. So if we're talking about grade-wise, you can say grades 6 through 10. And that is the first year of the MYP is called year 1. If that's your grade 6, grade 7 will be year 2, and so on until you reach grade 10, and that will be your year 5 of the MYP program. It was first offered in 1994, and the last of the IB programs are for the same age group. I'll talk first about the DP program, always blue, and that's, for easy reference for all of us. When we see blue, we know we're talking about the DP program. Research suggests many benefits to choosing the DP, or the diploma program. The program aims to develop students who have excellent breadth and depth of knowledge, students who flourish physically, intellectually, emotionally, and ethically. I mentioned this earlier. Between ages of 16 and 19 are the students that usually take this program. Talking about our current terminology, or the terminology of the UAE, if you're talking about grade-wise, it's grades 11 and 12. I think British will be years 12 and 13, as long as you are focusing on the same age group. It was first offered in 1968. Now, I'm not talking about first offered in the UAE, but I'm talking about the program, the DP program was first offered in 1968. And finally, the last of the programs, again for the same age group, is the CP. This is kind of like the newest program offered by the IB, and that is the CP, or the career-related program. The CP is a framework of international education addressing the needs of students engaged in career-related education. It leads to further higher education, apprenticeships, or employment. Ages 16 to 19. And finally, it was first offered by the IB in 2012. So we're talking about a program that is less than 10 years old. That is the IB programs in a nutshell, all four. How would you, as an educator or as an administrator or a leader in your school, choose what program is best for you? Well, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, you want to talk about what age group are you talking about? What age group would you like to offer the IB program for, and why? Why do you want to offer an international program? Aside from the benefits that we have mentioned, the benefits that you have seen, there might be other reasons that you want to do it as an educator or as a leader. So let's say that we want to talk about the DP program for grades 11 and 12. You want your students to have an exam at the end of their time in your school, a school leaving exam. Maybe that's one of the reasons. Another reason can be because you know that the DP program is very famous, and it gets students access to a lot of universities, and it is accepted by universities worldwide, government agencies worldwide, the Ministry of Education, and so on and so forth. If those are your reasons, then you're talking about grades 11 and 12, and you want to have you want to work on that program. If you want a program for the lower grades, then you want to talk about the MYP for grades 6 to 10. Can you have MYP and not have DP? The answer is yes. Can you have DP and not have MYP? The answer is yes. But the best solution, of course, would be to have one IB program lead to another. So the question to ask here is, does the PYP program, the first program I showed you in IB, let me just go back to PYP. This is the PYP. Does that lead to MYP? The answer is yes. Does MYP lead to DP or CP? And the answer is yes again. So you can have a continuity of programs. Have a student in kindergarten or primary school be exposed to PYP, study the PYP program up to grade 5, then move on to MYP, study the international mindedness and all that MYP has to offer, and then lead them to DP. That way you'll have a student who is internationally minded, you have a student who is balanced, you have a student who is principled, you have a student who thinks critically, a student who is an inquirer, which is very important in the IB. So for the 4 programs, there's a lot of support that is offered in the UAE and of course worldwide. There's a network of IB schools in the UAE that you can rely on, and you can see the experiences and learn from the experiences of other colleagues and other schools. What works in one school, yes, might not work in another, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So you can rely on their experience, and you can rely on their knowledge, and you can rely on their expertise. And as I said, the IB offers a lot of support, and there's a lot of training that you can get your teachers involved in. And even there's training for the leadership team, which is very important because you want the leadership team to be on board if a program is offered. Now, some might say that the IB programs are expensive. Education is expensive as a whole, and the IB programs are not expensive. The thing is that when people talk about the expenses of IB programs, they're associating that with PD. PD is expensive whether you're talking about IB or not. And don't you want to educate your teachers and train them and have them to become professionally developed and able to teach the students? What do we want? What do we want to have our students learn? We want the best educational outcomes of any program that we offer, and that's what the IB does. Now, I hope I have covered the different aspects of international education, worldwide, and in particular in the UAE. And Ms. Faiza, I believe I have 10 minutes left, and I promise to have some time aside for questions and answers.
That's right. We can go up to 5 o'clock if you like.
Okay, sure. Okay. We'll talk more about the international education. So let me just backtrack and talk about the international education in particular, the definitions of international education. I said one definition of international education is having an international program. So can you have an international program, for example, the DP, for one particular group? That is what we have in my school. My school is mainly nationals, UAE nationals. In my campus, we have 97% of my students UAE nationals, and we have all 3 IB programs. We have the PYP, MYP, and DP. So is that considered a national or international school? Well, the name is national because that is the name of the school. It caters mainly to national students, but we do offer international programs, and our teachers are international. Most of our teachers are expats, and that is international teachers, of course. So you have a school that offers international programs. Again, going back to the definitions, you can have a school that offers its own curriculum, kind of like what I mentioned about SABIS or Shwefat. They have their own curriculum, and when they opened a branch in the UAE, they continued with their own curriculum. When they opened branches in Bahrain and they opened branches in other parts of the world, they have branches in Jordan, they have branches in Dubai, and I mentioned they even have branches in the States. What kind of program are they offering? they are offering their own Shuafat program or their Sabbath curriculum. Is that considered an international school? And the answer is yes, because they have open branches internationally. So a third definition, going back to the definitions, a third definition of international schools is not only a school that offers international programs or a school that offers, or that, a school that has branches in different countries, but it's also a school that has international students or international staff. For example, a school that has international students coming from different countries, that is an international school. The staff are also international. So there isn't one set definition for international education, and you can see different schools offering different international programs. Each one might be different than the other. One school offering the IGCSE, another school offering the IB, yet they're both considered international schools. Some schools offer more programs they offer other programs than international. They might also offer the national program and link that also, or add to that, international programs. Is that possible? Yes. But again, as I said, do not reinvent the wheel. Check with other schools, check your networks, speak to them, talk to fellow educators, and see what is being offered in other schools, and rely on their experiences. Teachers love to talk, and I mean educators as a whole. We all love to talk, and you can see I've been talking for about an hour here, so we love to talk. So rely on their experiences, their expertise, their knowledge, and see what works in one school. Apply that to your situation and see if you can benefit from that or not. Ask, talk. You can ask the same question many times. It doesn't matter. You are approaching an international program that you want to make sure is best for your students, for your setup, for your context, and you want to make sure that that works, because backtracking or changing your mind a few years down the road might be very problematic. I just want to end by saying this. In one of the schools that I worked at, we had in the past, we had the IGCSE program, and it was going well. And we were doing what we had to do with respect to authorizations and the external exams and preparing our students and so on. And then all of a sudden the board decided that, look, British is not good enough for us. We want to switch to American. For no reason, well, I knew one of the reasons. One of the members of the board, son, was not in favor of IGCSE. So he wanted, the American program. So we met, and I tried to convince him that it's not in the best interest of the school to switch programs at that particular time, but they insisted. So I told him, if we want to switch programs from IGCSE to American, you have to give me a guarantee that we'll stick to that system for the next 10 years. And they were shocked. 10 years? I said, yes. 10 years will give us enough time at the school. Now, I might not be there for 10 years, and I clearly am not, of course, but 10 years will give us enough data to see how the students are performing. Did we do the students justice by switching programs? I want to see what happens to the grade 1 students when they graduate, or the grade 2 students when they graduate from grade 12. Has the system worked for them or not? But if I change systems every couple of years, it's not in the benefit of students, parents, the school community, or anyone involved. Thank you very much for your time. And back to you, Faiza. I hope I did not bore you guys to death. And I hope I was able to shed some light on international education. Thank you.
Thanks, Riyad. That was very comprehensive and a lot of information there. And you can get engaged by the chat that the audience was really enjoying it. We have a few questions for you, if you'd like me to read them out. Yeah, so here's the question asking about recruiting IB teachers. How easy is it to recruit IB teachers as opposed to IGCSE ones in the UAE context?
Well, to be honest with you, let me speak from experience. If you focus on recruiting IB teachers, it is difficult. but don't focus on that. What you can do is you always want to hire the best teachers, regardless of whether they're IB trained, IGCSE trained or not. You want to hire the best teachers. And I'll give you a simple formula. The teacher that you hire, you want that teacher to teach your son or daughter. If the answer is yes, hire them. Of course, after you do, the interview and all of that. If you're convinced, hire that teacher. Training is offered for teachers. You can hire the teacher and then train them to become IB teachers. To answer your question.
Thanks, Riyad. There's another question here. How does MYP prepare students for examinations? They only seem to have e-assessment in grade 10.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry. How does MYP prepare students for examinations? They only seem to have e-assessment in grade 10.
Yeah, well, of course, MYP is the program that is before DP or CP. It offers, it trains the students on different exams. We have the formative exams, we have the summative exams that are done at the school level. And all of the exams and the personal project that we do and all of the other assessments that we do, all of those prepare the students for the e-assessment exams at the end of the grade 10 or year 5 of the program. And it also prepares them for the DP exams at the end of grade 12.
All right, so there's another one asking, I'm doing Pearson BTech level 5. Am I eligible to work in an IB school?
Well, let me answer it this way. It's not whether you're eligible to work in a school or not. I think you have to meet the criteria of the country, number one, and two, the criteria of the school, whatever they have. And if you do meet, yes, I mean, why not? We have had teachers teach the DP program who are NQTs, fresh out of college. We took them aboard, we trained him, we prepared him, and they continued with us for many years. Let me just say this, and I don't mean to talk about a particular citizenship or nationality, but in my school, we have a lot of Irish teachers. They're doing a great job. IB is not offered in many of the Irish schools or in many of the schools in Ireland, but they join our school, we train them, and they become IB teachers, whether they're DP or MYP or PYP. And some have been with us for many, many years, and they're doing a great job.
Okay, thanks, Riyad. There's another question from George. How do you see education in the UAE in the coming years? How will international education support the UAE in preparing for the coming 50 years?
Okay, I think for all of us that have been in the UAE in the past 2 years, we know that it's going to be somewhat virtual, at least part of it. And, I'm not speaking officially here, but this is, through experience and through, talking to different people and different organizations. Virtual education is here to stay. We cannot kid ourselves. And let's not do the mistake that Nokia, the phone company, did many, many years ago when they were on top of the world with, phones. And then, when the smartphones came out, they're like, oh, we're going to stick to our own thing. And that was their biggest mistake. So let's get on board with virtual education. Let's make the best out of it. It's a headache, yes. We have internet issues we will have, but all of those can be worked out. As a school, we talk, we think, we plan, and we execute what's best for the students. How is education changing in the UAE? If you looked at the timeline that I showed a few slides ago, you can see how the education changed in the UAE since 1970 with one international school, Shuwaifat, in the Emirate of Sharjah. Look at the number of international schools now. Look at the number of international schools opening up in whether it's in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. So you will have schools collaborating. You will have the proximity learning that I spoke about earlier going on, not only between different branches of the same school, but also between different schools. They might be competing, but at the end, they want to benefit their students and they want to reduce cost. So I think that's what education will be like in the UAE.
It's well answered. Riyad, there's another question from Neha here. What are your thoughts on schools which offer bilingual education in international schools? As an educator, how effective is this approach?
No, I differ, I don't differ, but there are different explanations to what bilingual education is. Bilingual education to some is you teach the same subject, let's say math, in Arabic, and then you teach the same subject in English. Now, I've never worked in a school like that, but I know schools that do that. They have their challenges. Other schools, they call bilingual education offering a second language or a third language. Now, I've worked in many schools, actually all of the schools that I worked at in the past 23 years offered second or third languages. That is very effective. Actually, the IB calls for that. You cannot have the DP program without having, a second language. Usually students will choose English, English and Arabic. Others will choose French, Spanish, or whatever. But it's very effective. Did I miss part of the question, or am I
No,
good?
that was it. That was it.
Yeah, sure.
Is career development or career psychology a part of any CDP for IB faculty?
To be honest with you, my knowledge on CP is not, I've never worked with the CP program before. I know of it. It's recent, but in order to be fair and honest, I cannot answer that question.
Right. Are there any more questions, guys, or we'll wrap it up for today? Lots of thanks coming through.
Thank you. They've been an amazing audience.
Yeah, they have. Okay, thank you, Riyad. It was very thorough, very interesting. The audience obviously enjoyed it quite a bit. And I'll say to you guys, please keep in touch. If you have more questions, reach out to us, visit the website and get in touch with us. And until next time, I'll say goodbye now. I'll stop the recording. But this video would be available on our Murdoch University YouTube channel, so you can go and watch Riyad again. Thanks a lot, Riyad.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Faiza. Thanks for
everyone.
having me.
Cheers,
And thanks for the
everyone.
audience for, being very patient and for their
Yes.
questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.